Hey everyone, happy to have you here with me once again. Welcome back. Today, as you can see in the today, what do you want, honey? Venga. Venga. What do you want, honey? She never lets me film. Come here. Come with mommy. Do you want to say hi again? Lately, you've been in all of my videos because you don't let me film. Say hi. Okay. As I was saying, hey guys, happy to have you here with me once again. Welcome back. Today, as you can see in the title, we're having the second part of a video that I think that you really enjoyed, and that is randomly selecting palettes in my collection and deciding if I will repurchase them, if I will need to purchase them again, or if this is the first time that I see the palette. Will I be interested again in these palettes, and what will I do? So yeah, this is the second video that I filmed. In the first video, I randomly selected 5 palettes and decided if I wanted to repurchase them or not. And in this video, I finally got help from my boyfriend, and he select for me, I think 8 palettes out of my collection. And I can say that this video it's going to be hard. We have a better variety now because last time I got a lot of Colourpop, and now I think I only got 1 or 2 palettes from Colourpop. But as I was saying, this is going to be way more challenging because the method that he used was seeing all of the palettes and choosing the ones that he thought they were more pretty, like his favorites. And I have to say that a lot of these palettes are favorite of mine too. So it's going to be challenging, or maybe not favorites, but are palettes that I really like. So it's going to be a challenge, but this intro, thanks to my cat, has been already way too long. So let's start with the palettes. And I have a pile over here with no specific order, and I'm going to go through it. And the first palette that he chose is actually one of the first palette that he ever gifted to me, and it's this palette over here. This is the 70s Love Group palette from Root Cosmetics, and it looks like this in the inside. And I just mentioned this palette in my palettes that I haven't used so far this year, and I mentioned that the quality of this one is not the best. This is not a palette that I choose for myself. It was something that he chose for me, or he chose for me. And I don't think I will repurchase it, to be honest. Like, the quality is not the best. Some of the shades are really challenging to use. This is a shade that I really don't enjoy. It's kind of the same shade that it's in my Limoncello palette. It's really similar, and I said in that palette that I really don't enjoy that shade. This over here, this purple, it's pretty but really difficult like to build because it's quite patchy. But lately a lot of people is talking about a new palette, the Sorcerer Palette. I don't remember the brand. And I feel like the color stories of these two palettes are kind of similar. Of course, the other palette, it's way like more special, has a lot of duochromes, multichromes, and that kind of stuff. But I will say the color story in general, it's quite similar. So I don't know, I've been feeling a little bit more inspired to read for this palette because of that. But I don't think this is a palette that I will have chosen for myself. Moving on, we have a palette that just recently was an unused palette in my collection, but I just used it for the first time this weekend, and that is my Norvina palette from Anastasia Beverly Hills. And this is such a pretty palette. I got it for myself, like a birthday present for myself this year in May, and I didn't use it at all until this weekend in August. I'm almost at the end of August, and so far I have only used the mattes because I wanted to build something kind of pinky to use a duochrome from my Adept Cosmetics palette. And I have to say that I really enjoy the formula. I used the shade Passion, Love, and Base. And they were really nice. The shade Passion was really pigmented, which I'm not surprised because ABH like dark colors are really pigmented. And if I found that the mattes in this palette are amazing, I cannot wait to use the shimmers because those are the ones that made me buy this palette. So yeah, even if I haven't almost used this palette so far, this is definitely a palette that I will repurchase. And next we have one of my newer palettes in my collection that I just got. I just rolled it out from my deck of panning project pan, and that is my retro palette from Natasha Dinona. And if you saw that video, maybe you're not going to be surprised of what I'm going to say. This is a really nice palette. It's a palette that I really wanted from the brand, but now I can say that this is not a palette that I will repurchase. And I feel kind of bad because this was a really expensive palette. Natasha Dinona is already a quite expensive brand, and since it's not available on my country, I need to purchase it from resellers, and that makes the price even higher. Don't worry, my cat is okay. She's really dramatic while she's playing, and she's playing with one of her toys. But as I was saying, purchasing it from a reseller made the palette way more expensive. And it's a nice palette. Don't take me wrong, I don't really regret purchasing the palette because it's a nice palette. I like the quality. But I have these shades 3 million times in my collection already. The shades, I don't feel like they're that special. I don't know, it doesn't even have, I don't think it has any duochromes or some like special shades. The most special shade in this palette is the shade Psychedelic, and I have to say that I don't love how it performs. So yeah, it's really sad for me to recognize this, but this is not a palette that I will repurchase. Moving on, we have another palette that my boyfriend gave to me for my birthday this year, and that is my Rose Quartz palette from Huda Beauty. And so far, I will say this is the favorite palette that have joined my collection this year. It's such a beautiful palette. I just really love it. It's something that when it just came out, I wasn't really sure about it because again, I have these shades a million times in my collection. But in this case, I don't regret purchasing this palette because the quality is amazing and it has some really special shades that makes this palette unique in my collection. Of course, my favorite shade, it has to be Cosmic Love, not Magic Moon over here. It's just really pretty, and I have said this before, but this feels like something that came out of the TV show, how it's called, the one with Zendaya. I don't remember the name. I want to say Euphoric, but it's not that. Euphoria. It was close. So this shade, it's so freaking pretty. It's so unique. Every time that I use it, I get so many compliments on that shade. So yeah, this is in general a great palette. It was expensive, so I'm really happy that it was a gift. It was a really thoughtful gift out from my boyfriend. And yeah, this is something that I would repurchase. What's next? Okay. Moving on, we have another palette that I wouldn't repurchase. Yes. This is another palette that so far this year I haven't used at all. This is my Smittens in Switzerland palette from BH Cosmetics. Someone over on Instagram said that this palette was kind of similar to the palette Untamed by Sigma. And I really wanted that palette at the time, so I decided to give it a try with this palette and see if the color story like helps me to get the other palette that was way more expensive out of my mind. And now I'm happy that I didn't purchase the Untamed palette considering how expensive it is. but I don't like this palette. I don't know why. This is just not a palette that I want in my collection. I mean, it's not something that I don't want in my collection, but it's something that I don't use. Some of the shades are really pretty, especially I enjoy this mauve color over here. But I feel like the color story is not cohesive. Every time that I look at it, I don't know what to do with it. I feel like I'm missing some transition shades. These three shades are kind of similar, maybe different enough, but I will have to skip at least one of them, maybe the middle shade over here. And I don't know, in general, it's not something that it makes me feel inspired. It's not something that I want to use frequently, so it's something that I wouldn't repurchase. Next palette, again, is another palette that I will repurchase, and that is my Dusk for Dusk palette. This is another newer palette in my collection that I got this year, and I think I have used it like twice so far. I know it's a pretty unused palette in my collection, but it's a really pretty palette. It's kind of the perfect cool tone palette for me because it's cool tone, but it has a little bit of warmth on it that makes it more easy for me to use. I purchased this palette because Agnieszka from, well, Agnieszka on her channel over here recommended this palette so much last year, so I got tempted, and I have to say that this palette has some really unique shades, and I have a ton of Colourpop shades in my collection because I will say Colourpop is the brand that I own the most on my collection, so I have so many shades, and still I can say that in this palette I found some shades that are quite unique to my collection that I don't have in any other Colourpop palettes, and that is difficult to set. So yeah, this is a palette that I will repurchase, and I think I should rotate it into some kind of project soon, because I feel like this is the perfect season to use it, and we're almost in spring, so I need to use it now. Moving on, we have a difficult palette that I'm not sure if I will repurchase or not. This is my Smoke and Roses palette, again from Colourpop, and this is another palette that I got this year, and it's basically completely unused. I think I have used one shade twice, and that's all. But this is so pretty. I mean, I know that I have these shades in my collection, but I still feel like there's some shades that are quite unique. But now that I'm looking at it more closely, I can see a lot of overlapping. For example, these two shades are quite similar with this one too. These two shades look quite similar. These two pinks, like there is a lot of overlapping in this palette, and that used to happen in larger palettes from Colourpop, but still it's a pretty nice palette. And considering that this is kind of a low-cost brand, I don't regret getting this palette, even if I haven't used it so far. And pinks and purples are my favorite shades to wear in my eyes, so maybe purchasing this palette was a mistake, but I think it's a mistake that I will do again. So yeah, I think I will repurchase this palette. And finally, we have our last palette, and again, I don't know if I will repurchase it or not. This is my Zodiac palette from BH Cosmetics, and this was one of my favorite palettes last year. And I don't know, this is how it looks on the inside, and the shimmers in this palette are really pretty. I adore this shade over here. It's a shade that is not unique in my collection, but I love anyway. I think I wouldn't repurchase it just because how bulky it is. This palette didn't need to be this huge. I know that the design is quite pretty, and I know that my boyfriend chose this palette for this video because he really likes like how it's arranged, but storing this palette, it's so freaking hard. And now I can say that I have these colors already on my collection, but it's pretty. It was one of my favorite palettes last year. I think when I ranked my whole eyeshadow palette collection last year, I think this one was in the top 3. And now I don't know if I will repurchase it. That's hard. I feel again for the color story I will repurchase that because it's really pretty. I really enjoy it, but it's so bulky that I wouldn't do it again, and that's really sad. I still enjoy this palette. It's still one of my, well, I don't know if it's a favorite anymore, but I can see how this palette was a favorite. It's something that I still really enjoy looking at it, at least. And I know that it's not something that I will declutter, but if I will need to purchase it again, I wouldn't because of that. What the hell is she doing? She was attacking the paper towel from the kitchen. But yeah, that's everything for today. Those are all the palettes that my boyfriend chose for me. And it's kind of funny because half of them I wouldn't repurchase and half of them I would. Summarizing, I never know how to say it, but the palettes that I wouldn't repurchase are the Love Group from Root Cosmetics, the Natasha Dinona Retro Palette, the Smittens in Switzerland from BH, and the Zodiac Palette from BH Cosmetics again. And the palettes that I won't repurchase are my Norvina Palette from ABH, my Rose Quartz from Huda Beauty, and Lust for Dusk and Smoke and Roses from Colourpop. I don't know if my boyfriend will want to help me again with this video, but it was really fun. I like the variety of palettes that he chose for me, and I think it was more interesting than last time. So hopefully you enjoy it too. But that's everything for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please consider subscribing, giving it a thumbs up, and leaving a comment down below. That really helps my channel. Let me know if you have any of these palettes. Would you repurchase them? Do you agree with what I said, or do you think one of them that I will repurchase you wouldn't, or the other way around? I don't know if I'm making sense anymore, so I should stop filming. But yeah, that's everything. I hope I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!